Hello everyone! Welcome to the Norscan faction overview. In this video, we're going to cover every single unit introduced with the new faction, a couple of mock battles, some situations that your Norscan units can thrive in, and maybe some counters towards some of their big baddies, the Mammoths, which we'll get into later. And then at the end of the video, maybe cover some campaign stuff. So let's dive right in. We're going to go from top to bottom, left to right. There is a lot to cover. This is going to be a long video, so, you know, grab some popcorn, hot dogs, whatever you like to eat, and settle in. Before we actually begin with the units, something I want to cover. There is a faction-wide mechanic to the Norskins, and that mechanic is rage. So all Marauder units share this rage, all the human people. So the leaders, the Marauder Chieftain, Wulfric the Wanderer, all the shamans, all the human people in the faction. Marauders, these guys, the chariots, the Marauder horsemen, but not the Mammoths. There are Marauders in Mammoths, but they do not have the rage ability. But besides that, all of the human people, including the chariots and the Marauder horsemen, share this ability called rage. So as you can see here, if they are in combat for, let's say, 3 minutes in melee, then they're going to receive the following buffs: 8 leadership, 12 physical resistance, and 8 melee attack, which is a pretty big deal if they can survive that long. Now, if you disengage from melee, not rout, but like disengage, maybe the enemy is routing and you have nothing left to fight, the buffs will go down and deteriorate over time, so you want to make sure that you are throwing your units into another fight as soon as you can to try and keep these buffs active as long as possible, because they do make a difference. So just wanted to cover that. That is going to be the faction mechanic of Rage. There is one unit, which we'll get into later, that has a better version of Rage, the Berserkers, but again, we'll get into that in a little bit. So, for the Marauder Chieftain, the very basic of lords for the Norscan faction, there is nothing special about this person when they are unmounted. They have the Rage, they have Encourage like everybody else, they have the basic Stand or Die and Foe Seeker. Their stats are okay, their melee attack and defense is okay. They're not very tanky, really. Their melee, or their weapon strength is not very high, but they are also very cheap. The main thing is going to be their mount options. We have the basic horse, which, okay, it's a horse, makes you go faster, charge bonus is increased. We also have a Marauder Chariot for 350, which he still does maintain his rage bonus as well, and gains a slight bonus against infantry, so that's also kind of neat. Kind of like the Beastmen lords who can go on chariots. This is kind of the same thing for this guy. He also gains a lot of armor with the 100 armor, but I think what you're going to be seeing this person brought on with in almost all multiplayer battles that anyone brings from Marauder Chieftain is going to be the War Mammoth, because, oh my god, let me tell you this right now, Mammoths are pretty good. Mammoths are more than pretty good. The bonus to infantry damage, though, is only 5, so that's kind of weird. But ignore that, it's fine. They do massive amounts of damage to anything and everything in the game that stands before them. They are no joke and are a serious threat. And if you take off these abilities, you can get a leader on a War Mammoth for only 2 grand, which is pretty cheap for a Mammoth. I can't stress enough how much the Mammoths are strong in this game, and I'm going to show you videos later detailing their strength. But you can see that on the Mammoth, he's going to also gain Fear and Terror, and then Siege Attacker, which is mostly a campaign thing, but if you play siege battles, then know that if you put this dude on there in a multiplayer battle that's siege, he has Siege Attacker. His stats are lowered, 41 and 35, but that doesn't matter. His armor is only 70, but he has 10,000 hit points. He goes from on foot to 2,800 to 10,000 hit points. The Mammoths are so very tanky. And that is the basic Marauder Chieftain. Move on to Wulfric the Wanderer, the first of 2 legendary lords in the game. For Wulfric, his mounts remain the same as the Marauder Lord, including his own War Mammoth. When he is on a War Mammoth, he gains his own little throne, as you saw in the video I already showed you there. He looks badass. He has slightly better stats than the basic Marauder Chieftain in melee while on the War Mammoth. His other cool stuff, like even on foot, this guy is kind of a beast. He has a very high weapon strength, his armor is 100, he has the good shield, high leadership, high melee stats. So even on foot, he is still a force to be reckoned with, because with his abilities, we have the Foe Seeker, Stand or Die, which is, you know, whatever. But he also has this Hunter of Champions, which is a 24-second hex, which is going to destroy the defenses of any lord or hero. As you can see there, minus 60 melee defense, minus 48% speed, and minus 30 armor. So the fact that he's not really mainly focused on armor piercing is not that huge of a deal when he's on foot, because you can slap this Hunter Champions on somebody, lower their armor so that your high weapon strength has that much more of an impact against the enemy lord. But if he is on foot, beware that if he's fighting like Karl Franz on a Griffin, the Griffin can knock Wulfric around just like any other person who's not on a mount. So he can lose fights that way if he keeps getting knocked down, and that's him on foot. The Hunter Champions is a really good hex, and you slap that on and go after an enemy lord, and they have a very bad day. His other unique ability is that he gains 2 charges of Sea Fang, which I'm probably showing right here, and this thing is cool. If it acts like a Winds of Death, so that's how you have to treat this spell. You have to aim it up, and if he moves after casting, the spell will move with him, just like Winds of Death. It's not as strong as Winds of Death, but it still looks just so cool, because he's summoning a giant ship with a full load of marauders, like out of the ocean, I guess, and then just having it slam through people, and it looks awesome. He gets 2 charges of it, and it deals a lot of good damage, especially to frontline like infantry units. It's really cool, and also applies Frostbite, which will lower unit speed by 52%. Frostbite's another thing introduced with the Norskins. Some units have it, and we'll cover those, later. It's a pretty nice debuff. Lower speed is always a good thing. So that is his other unique ability. It's really cool. And then for his items, his unique item is the Sword of Torgald, which for 120 seconds will buff his weapon damage by 22%. And if you put this guy on a War Mammoth, and then you... this does start off on cooldown though, so you're not going to have access to it immediately. But after 135 seconds, you pop this buff for 120 seconds, his attack goes to like 700. And then if you want to even go more crazy, you can team him up with a Firecaster and buff his attack damage by even more with the Sword of Wrath and Ruin or something like that. It's nuts. Now notice he does cost a lot of money, so you honestly, you probably don't need Standard Die, you probably don't need Foe Seeker. If you want Hunter Champions, that's up to you, but if you want to try and get him as cheap as possible while on a War Mammoth and just focus on the War Mammoth, you can turn off all these abilities. I would keep this, and he's 2,500 on a War Mammoth, and he is just a savage. He is a savage. He crushes Cav, he crushes Grail Knights, doesn't matter. Foot Squire, anything you throw at him, he's gonna crush it. The only thing that Mammoths are really weak to is going to be ranged fire, and a lot of it, because they have a ton of hit points. Or like flying goon squads that come in and charge you with 3 groups of Royal Pegasus Knights, which I'll show a video of that later. But besides that, he is a beast. He is a beast. Speaking of beasts, let's move on to Throg, who has no mount options because he's a giant ice troll. He looks really cool. His unique abilities here, well, he has Foe Seeker, but then he also has 3 charges of Copious Vomit, which is going to be a 100-meter range magic missile spell for magical and fire damage, and focuses on a single target. So I'm probably showing a video right here. He can actually use this against Clan Engrind. They're Ethereal heroes. It's a very specific counter, but it does a lot of damage to those guys. Besides that, normal heroes, it's okay. It's pretty cheap too. It's only what, 47? 74, sorry. It's 74 gold. I would keep it on him if he's dueling with an enemy lord or some single target unit. He can just kind of spit that out, and it's a pretty decent spell or ability. And then he comes with also Fight or Die, which is the opposite of Standard Die because it buffs your melee attack instead of melee defense, which is also neat. His unique item is the Crown, or the Wintertooth Crown, and this will make a unit unbreakable for 38 seconds. Normally, I don't stick with unbreakable abilities. I turn them off for the most part, but unbreakable kind of is even a bigger deal than normal here because, again, remember, all of your Marauder units have that rage ability, so the longer you can keep them in the fight, the stronger they will be. So having a unit that's about to rout, slap unbreakable on them, they could come out of that rout if they're still alive, stronger than before, and maybe even turn the tide against whoever they're fighting. So maybe. It's still pretty expensive, but it is a 40-second unbreakable, which is kind of a big deal, especially with this army composition, or this faction. And that's Throg. He's a really solid melee fighter. He has that Frostbite ability, so nothing is going to really escape from him. The thing is, he has pretty low armor. He does have regeneration, which is a big deal in multiplayer. But since he is so big, I feel like he can be easily focused down by, again, goon squads or range fire. He doesn't really have that much missile resistance at all. So I don't really know how effective he's going to be in multiplayer. He looks awesome. He has some cool abilities. His melee stats are really good. But a lot of lords like him, I guess there isn't really many lords like him, he is a monstrous lord. But, you know, people who have to walk around, although he is kind of fast, but usually they're not that great. But we'll see. His melee stats are really good. I'll see, you know, when I test him in multiplayer, how much he can actually live through. Regeneration is a huge deal in multiplayer again, so he may be pretty good. And if you turn off all of his abilities and just want an anti-large, anti-armor, very strong melee lord, then he's only 1600. So that's also pretty cheap. And that weapon strength is nothing to laugh at. It's really high. And he can really wreck some cav. But anyway, I'll test him out in multiplayer later. But I have a feeling you're probably going to be seeing mammoths in almost every single multiplayer battle because they're mammoths and they are insanely powerful against everything in the game. Throg is cool, but he is no mammoth. But he is cool, but no mammoth. Alright, so let's move on to the heroes, starting with the Skin Wolf Changer. This is a very solid anti-large, anti-armor piercing melee fighter who comes with a very unique ability, the Ruinous Flesh. So 30-meter area around him, all units gain additional armor and missile resistance. So what I like to do with him is I put him in a pack of Skin Changers, which are the werewolf units we'll get into later, who have like lower armor. Buff their armor so that they're a little tankier, and you just roll them around as an anti-large squad. And with him, with some Skin Changers, you can destroy cav, any other large units, crypt horrors, trolls, you know, things like that. And he's pretty good. Now, I did do a test. He's not going to stand up against Gorbals, even though he is an anti-large, anti-armor piercer. Gorbals are still stronger than they are, but they are still rather strong, especially for the price. You can take these two off, keep Ruinous Flesh on for 1187, and he is a really good melee fighter, and again, really good against anti-large, which is kind of another main focus of Norsca. They have a lot of good options for anti-armor and anti-large units, so they're pretty tough. So that is the Skin Changer. Then we get to the Shaman Sorcerers of Death, Metal, and Fire. Not much to be said about these three. They don't really have any unique abilities other than what their School of Magic already gives them. So for the Death, what is this thing called? Well, this is Metal. We got the Metal Shifting. We have Power, Life Leeching, and then, I can't remember, the Flame Weakness. So nothing new there. Their melee stats slightly stronger than their Empire counterparts of the same lores. Slightly stronger with a 30 melee attack and defense. Their weapon strength is okay. So you can definitely throw this unit into a low tier unit. They do also come with rage, so the longer they're in there, the better they are, like all other Marauders. But just like all other casters, you gotta watch out for the heavy hitting units like Giants, Legendary Lords of like Karl Franz, King Lewin, you know the ones. But against Footmen, very cheap infantry, you can throw these guys in there, get their encouraging aura around your units, and they'll be fine while also casting spells. The unique casters are going to be these new Famille units. Famille Balefiend of Shadows and the Balefiend of Fire. These are pretty cool. So they are, man, they are all cool. All the Famille units, they come with magical attacks that also sunder, which is always a huge deal. The melee stats are not that bad, especially since they're a caster. Their hit points are very high. In fact, they're even higher than a Marauder Chieftain when unmounted. I mean, they're not 10,000 like a chieftain on a mammoth, but still. So yeah, they got the magical sundering attacks. Their weapon strength is mostly focused on anti-armor, which is insane. The charge bonus is really good. They come with fear. They come with, you know, all of the spells of their selected school, either fire or shadows. And they also come with evasion, which has been a campaign-only thing for casters. Evasion has been in the game for a long time, but these two actually get it as a thing they can use if you want. It's additional acceleration and speed, which may be okay, and it's super cheap, so like you can kind of just keep it thrown on there. And another cool unique thing about all Famille units, including these two casters, is that they have From the Mists, which as long as their leadership is above 50%, they gain additional missile resistance, which is also a welcome addition to these new units. So they are very tanky, especially for casters. You can throw them into the melee line and they will deal a lot of damage and help your other units deal a lot of damage with that Sunder trait that they also have. So these are very cool casters. You're probably going to see them a lot because they are tanky casters that can also resist missiles. So like they are pretty good. And so that is going to be the heroes for Norsca. They got access to a lot more lores than I would have expected. They have 4 lores: Shadow, Fire, Metal, and Death. So you have a lot of options for this faction. Thank God they didn't give them the life lore, because oh my god. That tied with Mammoths would be beyond insane. So yeah, again, that is your hero selection. So let's move on to the infantry, starting with the, I guess, kind of boring units of the faction, the Marauders. So we have the normal Marauders, we have the Marauder Spearmen, and then the Marauders with great weapons. The Marauders and Great Weapon Marauders are the exact same as their Chaos counterparts, but they are 30 gold more expensive because they come with the Rage trait. So all units, including the Horsemen we'll get to later, are 30 gold more expensive than their Chaos counterparts for that reason, because of the Rage. But it does make a difference. I have done tests with them, and the Marauders from Norsca will beat out the Marauders from Chaos. It's not totally one-sided, like the Norscan Marauders will still take a heavy beating, but they will win on their own against a Chaos counterpart simply because they're going to be buffed with, you know, 8 additional leadership, which keeps them in the fight. Then they get that 12% physical resistance, and it does make a difference. They are also fairly good against other low-tier infantry units of all factions. You know, swordsmen, spearmen, men-at-arms, you know, all those kind of low-tier infantry. The Rage does help a lot, and the longer they're in a fight, the stronger they get. So they're not bad. Like, they're kind of boring because they're just the Chaos Marauders, but the Rage trait makes them not bad. And then the Marauder Spearmen, though, are a nice addition because it does give your Norskins some low-tier infantry that is good against large units. They have a fairly decent high melee defense, charge against large, or charge defense against large, and okay leadership. So it's a nice addition. I'm glad that they're here, so you have the choice of getting Spearmen. They're not bad, and they also get that Rage trait. Then we move on to the first Renown unit, the Horn Marauders. These dudes look pretty cool. They got the capes, they are upgraded Marauders, they have really good melee stats, they are immune to psychology and immune to vigor, which is kind of a big deal because, again, the longer they're in a fight, the stronger they are, and their stamina isn't going to affect them. So as the stamina gets lower, your vigor gets lower, your units suffer a lot of penalties, and they just get worse and worse. But these dudes are going to get stronger and never lose any stamina. And they're immune to psychology, so it's going to be hard to break them with fear and terror because they're immune to it. And they have a 70 leadership, so these dudes are going to be staying in the fight a long time with their pretty good melee stats, and they're just going to keep getting stronger and stronger, and the armies around them are just going to get weaker and weaker because they're going to be suffering from vigor loss due to fighting, and these guys are just going to be rocking it like Grail Knights, kind of. So they are pretty good for the price. 200 more than a normal Marauder. I think they're pretty good. Kind of boring. There's nothing super special about them, but I think they're really solid. And they look cool. And then we move on to one of the new Marauder units, the Marauder Berserkers. Oh boy. So the Marauder Berserkers are pretty good. They have a 70 leadership, which is really high. Their speed is really high for a infantry unit. Their melee attack of 40 is really good. They have a weapon strength of 52, charge bonus of 30. On top of that, these Berserkers are also immune to psychology, so it's going to be harder to break them due to fear and terror because they can't be affected. And on top of that, they also have Frenzy. And it's not even done there. The Berserkers also get an upgraded version of Rage, which enables them to get to their stages in half the time and get double the bonus. So every other Marauder for stage 1 gets 8 leadership. These dudes get 16 in half the time. And again, in stage 2, they get double the resistance. In stage 3, they get double the melee attack. These guys are so strong. So very strong. So I'm actually going to show you here a series of very quick videos showing them against various units from different factions. Just so you can see how tough these dudes can be. So as you saw there, the Berserkers are kind of insane, and you're going to need to counter these guys by either charging them down with some decent cav, or stopping them with, you know, crossbows, guns, something to keep them from tearing your front line to pieces, because they will. Especially like the Empire and Bretonnia. Nothing Bretonnia has for infantry can stand up to these dudes really at all. For the Empire, the greatswords can, as you can see there, I think I showed a video of that, but anything below the greatswords gets wrecked. Flagellants, oh my god, don't even try. And anything really for the Empire just gets totally destroyed by these Berserkers. So you really need to kill them with ranged, or like I said, charge them down, do something to stop them. They are nuts. And then their renowned unit, which would be the second renowned unit for Norsca, is going to be the Brutes of the Hound. These are just upgraded Berserkers. They are unbreakable Berserkers that also cause fear. Unbreakable Berserkers that cause fear with better melee stats than normal Berserkers. So you're going to have to kill all of them. There's a great chance that they are going to eventually end up with their stage 3 buff, which makes them even stronger. And yeah, it's a very good renowned unit. Again, you have to target these guys down with range. You have to stop them before they just start tearing into your infantry, and especially your squishy, you know, ranged units. Like, not even dwarven longbeards can really stand up to these guys. It does take them longer to kill longbeards, but they can still kill longbeards, especially when they start raging up. It's nuts. They're really good. You have to stop them. They are a true threat. Very, very good. And then we get on to the Marauder Champions. These are going to be your tanky frontline fighters. They are on the way to becoming chosen. In fact, I think their description is these guys are training to become Chaos Chosen, basically. So they have 80 armor. They're not as tanky as Chosen. They have decent melee stats with 36 melee attack and 49 melee defense, which is really high. And they have a very high weapon strength. And of course, they come with rage. It's a very basic unit, a very tanky unit that can also deal some damage, and they are going to get stronger over time. The problem is they are 1,000, and they're in a roster that also has Berserkers. Now don't be wrong, like the Marauder Champions can stand up to a lot of different infantry. They will hold for a long time. I just don't know how often they're going to be used. I have a feeling them and their counterparts, the Marauder Champions with great weapons, are probably going to be relegated in multiplayer to the same place that Chosen are in most games, and that is not being used at all. But we'll see. So speaking of that, let's get on to the Marauder Champions with great weapons. They also have 80 armor. They have a very high set of hit points. Decent speed, I guess, for heavily armored units with 33. Their melee stats are not bad. 36 and 28 is not bad, but for 1100 it's still pretty expensive. But really, honestly, like a lot of these high tier units usually share pretty low melee stats. Their weapon strength here is mostly focused on anti-armor. And these guys can't actually take down Black Orcs, which cost the same amount of money. So these dudes can beat them in melee, which is kind of crazy. But on the flip side, though, just know that like units like Great Swords can still trade really well into these Marauders with great weapons, but they're not bad. They're not bad. The only thing, again, is like they're 1100, and I just don't know if you really need them in this army with all of the other anti-armor units that you have at your disposal. But they're there. They're very strong Marauders. They're very solid. We'll see how they fare out in multiplayer, how many, you know, are ever brought actually in multiplayer. Now let's move on to the missile infantry for the Norskins. We have javelin throwers, and then we also have Marauder Hunters, which are like javelin throwers, but they throw axes. So the javelin throwers and the Marauder Hunters, I think out of these two, you're going to find more use out of the javelin throwers, because their javelins are very high damage and do bonus versus large with a very fast reload time, and they also have 16 ammunition, which makes them really devastating, especially to vampire counts. Vampire counts, you're going to have to summon those skeletal warriors on them and pray that you keep them locked down, or else these guys will tear your army to pieces. Your Cryptors, your Vargulfs, anything, really. They even do a lot of damage to Blood Knights, who are even engaged in melee. And remember, when Blood Knights are engaged in melee, they have missile resistance, but these dudes' missile attacks are so high, they can shoot Blood Knights like that if you don't stop them. So you really got to watch out for these guys, and they are very cheap. I think they are very, very good. The Marauder Hunters, yeah, they do anti-armor, but these guys are kind of hard to position. You got to be really careful in your positioning, because if you want them to assist your front line against a line of, let's say, like dwarf units or great swords, like heavily armored infantry or like Chaos Warriors, you have to angle them in the right way, or else they're going to be blocked by your own infantry units. The reason why these guys are so good is because their main focus is going to be very large creatures that are easier to see, so they're not really going to be blocked as much. These guys have a harder time, and they also only have 8 ammunition. So they're still pretty cheap. You can give them a try. They're okay if they can actually get a bearing on an enemy unit. They can tear them down pretty quickly. But again, they have like half the ammunition. Is that it? Yeah, half the ammunition of the javelin throwers. And there's other options in your army that deal armor-piercing damage, like, I don't know, Mammoths. So I don't know if you really need these guys, but the javelins are very good. I think they are very, very good and will be seen a lot. And they're so cheap, too. Then we move on to the cav and chariot section, which is only going to be 2 chariots. That is the Marauder Chariot, which is the exact same Marauder Chariot from the Chaos faction, except it has rage, so I'm not really going to say much about that. And then we have the Marauder Ice Wolf Chariot, which is dragged by Marauder Ice Wolves, as the name indicates. They are pretty tanky with 85 armor. They have the bonus to infantry, but they're not really armor-piercing focused chariots, unless you have them out of melee and just chucking their their axes. Because these are basically Marauder Hunters on the back of chariots throwing axes. But there's only 1 to each chariot, I think, or maybe 2. So they don't really do that much. It's kind of like Goblin Chariots. Even though it looks like they have a high missile attack, there's so few units that it's not really that impactful. And also, these guys can only throw in front of them. They don't have a 360-degree arc. It's a very low arc with a range of 65. It is only in the front of them. So their range attack really is not that amazing and requires a lot of micro usually. But they are decent melee chariots on top of that, so they're not terrible. They also have the Frostbite because of the Norscan Ice Wolves. They give them Frostbite, and they also do cause fear. And for 900, they're not bad. If you want to use a chariot, it's not terrible. It's not as good as like a Gorbeast chariot from Chaos, but they're not bad. I just wouldn't really rely on them for their missile damage aspect of their kit. Just kind of use them as melee chariots. And with the added bonus of if they're charging someone, they'll probably throw an axe or 2 on the way in, which does additional damage. So they're not bad for their price, I think. And with that being said, now I'm going to show you a kind of a mock battle with a Marauder-focused army that I made, and I hope you enjoy.
What? Yes, Marauders! Mortal fool! Yes, Marauders! Mortal fish! God's call! Take it, God's call! Mortal fool! Helps to slaughter! What? Your will! What? Yes! By God's call! What do you mean? Faster! Wulfric the Wanderer! For the masters! Stalkers! So be it! Chaos Marauders! Throw it again! Yes! Yes! Bring us to Carter! Consider it done! Slaughter! Your will! Up! Wulfric the Wanderer! Chaos Marauders! Yes, Lord! Try it! What? Orders taken! Massacre! What do you bid? Kill them! Chaos Marauders! Very well! Get them! Yes, Lord! By God's call! Yes! Your will! Slide us! What do you mean? Yes! Slaughter! Wulfric the Wanderer! Fight! What? We want their eyes! Your will? Bring us to carnage! Get us through it! Executing! Cowards! Chaos Marauders! Mortal fool! Mortal fool! Vimdoom! Chaos Marauders! Eat your soul! Wulfric the Wanderer! Massacre! Chaos Marauders! Further axes! Destruction! The inescapable one! Chaos Marauders! The Dark Gods command me! Chaos Marauders! My God's call! Consider it done! Chaos Marauders! What? What do you think? Yes! What do you mean? I'll take hits! Chaos Marauders! Whoa! Waterfall! Decapitate! Ha-ha! Pathetic! Let us show you true power!
So next up, we now have the Cav of Norsca, which is pretty light because it is just the Marauder Horsemen, the Throwing Axe version, and the Horse Masters. These are the exact same units as they are in Chaos, except for they also have the Rage ability. So I'm not really going to cover these that in depth. My quick opinion is that Marauder Horsemen and Throwing Axes are almost useless. You don't really need them. But the Horse Masters still remain a really good Javelin Cav that can also act as a pretty tough light Cav after their Javelins have been thrown, or, you know, whenever you need to charge them quickly into a crossbow unit. I think they're pretty good. Moving on to the monsters and beasts, we have the Norscan War Hounds. These are just reskinned Chaos War Hounds. They are the exact same, even the same price as Chaos War Hounds. Like, the stats are the exact same. That's all they are, just reskinned Chaos War Hounds. What is new is the Norscan Ice Wolves. These have Frostbite, really good melee attack, 42 weapon strength, and charge bonus. They are not to really be messed with. They're not just an easily killed puppy, kind of like the Chaos War Hounds are, or in this case the Norscan War Hounds, who are still a good unit of chasing down, you know, routing units, killing crossbows and stuff like that. They're still fine. But these puppies, I actually have a video, this little test battle I did against, I think it's Bretonnian Foot Squires, that I can show you here right now. Their high weapon strength is pretty intense, so I just want you to see this mock battle. This is totally not like a, you know, army versus army. This is just, I was like, you know, let me see what a bunch of Ice Wolves can do against these Foot Squires. So yeah, these Norscan Ice Wolves are pretty cool, and if not shot down or charged down by your shock cav type units, these can definitely cause you some problems. So they are a serious threat. I would not ignore these if you see a couple of packs of those out in the wild. Next on, we move to another renowned unit, the Beast of Tashnar. These function very similarly to the Vampire renowned unit, the Dire Pack. They are a pack of wolves who are still relatively squishy, but they can support your units in killing large creatures like other trolls. They can help against armored cav, but they are definitely going to need, they're a supporting role. They're not going to be able to charge, a Grail Knight, face to face and win. No, they will die very quickly. But again, you can use these as a very fast support to whip around the battlefield. They do have Frenzy, which is also a nice addition that the Dire Pack does not have. So they are more offensively focused. But again, if you leave them on their own against any type of knights or really any units at all, they can die really quickly. So that's definitely a kind of a glass cannon unit that you have to be careful with. But still worth, I think, for the price since they have that bonus versus large. Next on, we move to Norscan Trolls, which are the exact same as all the other normal trolls in the game. The exact same. There's no difference to these whatsoever, so I'm not really going to say much about them other than they are still a very good unit for the price. You have to watch it for their leadership like all other troll units, but if you can keep them supported with some kind of encouraging aura or leadership buff, then they can do a lot of damage for you. They have Regeneration of Fear. Pretty solid. Then we move on to one of the new Norscan units, the Skin Wolves. These are apparently marauders who have succumbed to something. I don't know the lore behind them, I'll be honest, but they have now transformed into werewolves, which are focused on anti-large damage dealers. Let me pull one up here. And I think they're pretty cheap for what they can do. So they do only have 15 armor. There are 18 in a unit, so they're a little bit bigger than like a normal monster infantry size like the trolls, which come in groups of 9. These are double those numbers. They are not that tanky though, but they do also at least have a physical resistance buff of 20%, so they are slightly tankier than they look, and they also have regeneration on top of that, so that means they have the flame weakness, but they're regenerating while also in the fight, and 60 leadership is not the best, but it's also not the worst. So they're not the tankiest unit, but they can deal a ton of damage. You can see their bonus versus large here is 30 on top of the 60 they already deal. Against really armored units, it will take them a while to chew them to chew them down, so they will need either multiple skin wolves, or they will need to be supporting other like anti-large, anti-armor piercing units to really tear down like a group of blood knights or something. But for 900 in cost, these guys are pretty deadly, especially again if you support them with the Skin Wolf Werekin, who can buff their armor up to 33, which makes them slightly tankier. It does help. You can also pull them out and have them regenerate for a little bit, pull them back in. I think they're a very solid choice for only 900 gold. I think they're pretty good, and you're probably going to see a lot of those. Then next on, we move on to the new Norscan Ice Trolls, which are just kind of beefier normal trolls. They're not like the armored trolls of the Chaos because they only have 40 armor, but instead what they do have is additional punching power with a higher weapon strength than the other normal trolls. So you can see 33 and 69. If you bring up the normal trolls here, they only have the 86 because it's split up between 23 and 63. So these do hit harder, and they do have the Frostbite addition to their melee attack, so they will slow all units around it, and they have slightly better melee stats here and there. Next on, we move on to the Skin Wolves, but the armored version. These are the Skin Wolves, but armored. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory. They are an increased cost of 150, and for that you're getting additional armor from 15 up to 70. But they are also 65 speed instead of 75? Yes. So you get a lot of armor, but they are slightly slower, and that's really the only difference. So for 150, a lot more tankier Skin Wolf. I think it's fine. It's a fine upgrade. I'm glad they're there. Nothing really super special about them, but it's nice that they're there. It's like the Trolls and Armor Trolls, but now for Skin Wolves. Then we move on to the Famille Warriors. So again, as I stated above with the Sorcerers of the Famille, these units, all the Famille Warriors, have magical sundering attacks. Their melee stats are usually not that great, but they are very defensive. They are very tanky because they all have very high armor. Starting with these basic Famille Warriors, for 1200, they have decent hit points, 110 armor, their leadership is average, speed is pretty good for monstrous infantry. I think it's about on par with most other monstrous infantry. Again, their melee attack is not too special for a unit that costs 1200, but it is also sundering magical, so that's cool. Melee defense is rather high, and their weapon strength is 80, so they're basically on par with like a troll. but a troll with higher leadership and a lot tankier with sundering attacks. Their charge bonus is also okay, but these guys, they can take a charge for your mainline infantry. They can take a charge of shock cav pretty well with their high armor, so you can use them for those types of roles. And on top of that, they also have this from the mist ability that all Famille Warriors share, which again is if their leadership is above 50%, they are also resistant to magic. They are pretty good. They're really expensive, but they're also pretty good. I'll show a video here showing the Famires in combat. There are actually a couple versions, so let's go through the rest of the Famires. I like them. I like having a unit that can kill ethereal units. I like that they have sundering. They are a very nice supportive unit for your main line. I don't think you should just have... Like, I don't think you should really ever nix the Marauders and just like, well, I'm just going to go a line of Famille Warriors. Because they are really tanky, but I think they're more of a support unit. And it's kind of shown here that the fact that they sunder armor is usually meant that other units kind of make use of that sundering ability for them to do better, you know? So this is a nice supportive unit. It's very expensive, but they are super tanky if you need that in your front line. Then next on, we go to Maws of Savagery. Again, I'll show a video of the Famire here after we get through this next section. The Maws of Savagery are the renowned unit for the Skin Wolves, and they are very good. They are the armored variant with very high armor. They have 71 leadership, and then they also have armor-piercing damage focused on top of the anti-large. The other Skin Wolves, they are just anti-large, mostly normal damage, but these are the armor-piercing version. For all of the Skin Wolves in the game, the armored version, unarmored, and these, you don't really want them to go one-on-one against an enemy shock cav. If you have them get charged by like Grail Knights and like really high powerful shock cav, they will die. These are really good at charging units that are already either in combat or you get the surprise jump on them. These guys can really tear most of the high tier cav of the game. They can tear them to pieces as long as they don't get charged. So if you can set up a situation where maybe you have a spearman, like a Marauder spearman, take the charge of a cav, or you can have one of these Famille Warriors, especially ones with the great weapons, which we'll get into later. If you have them take the charge with a very high armor, then you throw these guys in. They are really good at countercharging and crushing armored cav units. Really good. I think they are very good for the price of $12.50, and you probably will see them in a lot of armies, I would imagine. Next, we are going to talk about the Famille Warriors with great weapons. They are 100 more expensive than the non-great weapon versions. Their melee stats are slightly lower than the non-great weapon versions, but they still have the same tankiness with 110 armor. They still do magical attacks that sunder, and their focus is anti-large armor piercers. So this is another unit that you can sit in front of the Skin Wolves or any other unit to take a charge of shock cav, because they can wear it. They can wear a charge of Blood Knights for a little while with their very high armor, and then you countercharge with the Maws of Savagery, or, you know, you pin the Blood Knights in place, or whatever other large unit you're trying to kill. You pin them in place with maybe some Spearmen that run in there, and then you throw some Javelins at them, you throw the Skin Wolves at them, and you can tear down a lot of large units pretty quickly with these guys taking the brunt of the charge. And it's really a role that the Norskens kind of lack, because when I would say, like, the things that Norskens lack is obviously artillery, and then very solid cav, because they have no cav besides the Marauder Horsemasters. Like, all their power lies in their big units, their monsters, and of course the Mammoths, which we're going to get into later. But they don't really have any shock cav to just kind of go, you know, toe-to-toe with Blood Knights, Grail Knights, with Demigryph Knights. So they need to use their monstrous infantry, and these guys kind of fill that role. They can take the hit, and then they can deal some damage, and then they can hold people in place for a little while for the other units to pounce on whatever large creature you need to take down. So I feel like that's kind of their role. You don't need these guys to kill like trolls or crypt horrors or really, you know, like any of those other vampire cow monstrous creatures. Their main focus is going to be armored cav and armored large. So they're still pretty good. 1300 I think is really good because they need a unit that can take a charge, and these are one of those units. And then we're going to move on to the renowned unit, the Mist Stalkers. These are the non-great weapon Famirs, but they have 45 melee attack, 50 melee defense, which is really high. These are super tanky. But what's really cool about them, they do, I think, share the same weapon damage as the normal Famirs. They do, with the better melee stats. But they are Fear and Terror. The other ones, I think, just calls Fear. Yeah, so they Fear and Terror. They have that from the Mist ability. But Vanguard Deploy and Stalk. A Vanguard deployed stalked unit that is like a terror. These guys can deal with a lot of different things in this game can throw at you. And since they are stalked and Vanguard deployed, you can have these things whip around the flank because they're relatively fast too. 45 is pretty quick. So you can get them behind an enemy formation. They never know they're even there, and then out of nowhere, these insane unit just pops out and just is like wrecking havoc on your archers or whatever is in your backline, your cannons. They will be there out of nowhere with fear and terror, and they will destroy your artillery positions. They will destroy your crossbows. Maybe not destroy dwarves as quickly, because remember, they do have magical attacks. Let me just say this right now. I don't know if I would really bring Famille Warriors of any kind against dwarves, because all dwarves have the inherent high magical resistance, and all their damage, the Famille Warriors, are magical attacks. So you're kind of hurting yourself. Yes, they do have Sunder armor, but their actual damage is going to be severely lowered by the natural resistance of all dwarf units. But besides dwarves, these guys can just come out of nowhere and wreck your backline with fear and terror and just make them rout like that. They're relatively fast. They're very tanky. If they are found, they can take a fight for a little while. I think this is a pretty good unit. Yeah, it's super expensive, but if this unit can shut down an enemy artillery position or backline and like refocus the enemy's attention, like, oh shit, I gotta send everything back here now, like, you can really mess a player up with these guys coming out of nowhere. So yeah, I think they're really good. And that's going to cover the monsters and beasts section of the Norskins. And with that done, I wanted to show you a fight kind of showcasing the Famille Warriors. We're going to have Famille Warriors backing up a Marauder line, and then I bring Famille Warriors with great weapons to try and counter the enemy cav.
Now is our time! Chaos Marauders! That's what the monsters did! Moving! Fight! Cut chaos! Mortal fools! What? Ready to ravage! Boss! Get them! Yes! Throw on axes! Carnage! Shush! That's what the monsters speak! Ready! Let me kill! Your will? My God's call! Freeze my chaos! Your will? For the Blood God! Just a sec! What? So be it! Total fool! Chaos Marauders! What? Try it! Very well! Attack! What? Charge! Retreat! I am Overlord! Ready! My God's call! They will succumb! My God's call! Let me kill! Catch them! Yes? Mortal fools! They'll be screaming! Chaos Marauders! Kill them! God's gone! Yes! Yes, Lord! Good plan! Onwards!
So that, again, was just a quick mock battle with large funds for both me and the Bretonnians, but mostly showcasing the power of the Famille Warriors. So the normal Famille Warriors were supporting the Marauders in the front, and they broke all of the Bretonnian infantry forces, and then the Famille Warriors with great weapons, with the help of the Maul Savagery, and of course the Javelins, in the back were just terrorizing the Cav. Also Throg, because Throg is also pretty good at killing large armored units too, which is why I kind of threw him into that themed battle there. And then we move on to the stars of the show. Well, almost the stars of the show. Rare monsters and beasts. First, we have Mr. Giant. I usually call them Bob. This is the same giant that you've seen many times over. They do look different this time. They did remodel the giant, but stat-wise, they're the exact same as the Greenskins and Chaos, because the Beast Giant is slightly different. But yeah, the same stats through and through. The same exact giant you're used to. They are a very solid unit. Nothing wrong with the giant on the battlefield. They can kill enemy lords, kill enemy infantry. They're pretty good. Not too bad. And also this one looks kind of funny. Next we move on to the Frostworm, which is just a reskinned version of the Chaos Worm that their lords can ride. It also shares, I believe, the exact same stats of the Forest Dragon. And if you know how good the Forest Dragon is, well, you can expect about the same amount of damage and squishiness from this dragon as the Forest Dragon, which means it's really not that amazing. This one at least does have the Frostbite if you want to slow enemy attacks. It does hit pretty hard, but it is a giant target. It is a pretty squishy target for how expensive it is. So normally I don't really use the dragons. Just like I ignore the Forest Dragon, I probably will ignore the Frostworm for the most part. It's just too squishy. And unless you're really looking for an Air Superiority build with just a Manticore and a Frostworm, which is going to be kind of hard to do against most races anyway, I don't really see a real reason to get a Frostworm. If you really want to get in the backline of an enemy force, you have 3 different types of wolves that can do it. You have a lot of other monstrous infantry that can do it. You have these light cav units that can do it. You have chariots that can do it. There are so many things that can get in the back line. And then, oh yeah, not to mention, you can have Mammoths just break through the front line and get into the back. There's so many ways to break through or go around a mainline infantry force, a blockade force, if you will, for Norsca, that you don't really need the Frostworm. It looks cool. Feel free to try it. It is a dragon. I know people really love dragons, but it's so squishy. And why would you do that when you can get a feral mammoth for the same exact price, and this thing can wreck, again, literally anything in the game. Anything in the game this thing can kill as long as it's next to him. The basic feral mammoth is going to be the weakest of the mammoths. You can see there are 4 different kinds down there. The feral mammoth has the lowest leadership with 55, but all the mammoths have fear and terror, so you're not going to be able to hit them with a terror build. You can't fear them. Your best bet is like the Death Lore has the leadership negating spell that does, what, minus 16 leadership. I think they can stack one more other leadership debuff. So you can try to attack the mammoth's leadership. It may be harder to do, but you can try to go that route if you have the tools at your disposal. Besides that, you're just going to have to slowly whittle this thing down, and it's going to take you a while. Let me actually show you a couple videos here very quickly, because you may think like, oh, well, I got Blood Knights. Blood Knights are anti-large units. They're great at killing monsters. Well, so as you can see, the feral mammoth doesn't really care about your anti-large elite cav force. The Blood Knights may have a chance with enough invocations of Nehek and cycle charges to bring down a feral mammoth. It is possible, I think. But the thing is, you can also support the mammoth. What I would recommend is you can throw the mammoth in first to take the charge, because that's so many hit points. That's fine. And then behind them, you can have the Maws of Savagery. You can have a normal Skin Wolf. You know, any other anti-large unit kind of pounce on whatever charges the mammoth, and those whatever they are will most likely die. So you can't have the mammoths weather the charge. It's fine. They can take it. They have more than enough hit points to take it, and they can deal so much damage. So yeah, don't let this little anti-bonus versus infantry distract you from the fact that they can crush cav like that. They can crush anything. They can crush anything. I can't stress this enough how much they can crush. And that's just the Pharaoh Manticore. Mammoth, not Manticore. Mammoth. Then we move on to the War Mammoth for 500 more. Let's clear these other... Or actually, we can keep this one out. You can see that the hit points, which are already really high, jump up to 10,000. This is the Manticore... Or, why do I keep calling Manticore? This is the Mammoth that basically the Marauder Chieftain and Wulfric the Wanderer have. This is like their Mammoth. Except for these are loaded with a bunch of javelin-throwing Marauders up there that are going to be throwing anti-large javelins, as it's also trampling anything below its feet. It comes with Fear and Terror. It has 10,000 hit points. Its armor is pretty high. Its leadership is only 60, but that's okay. Its melee stats doesn't even matter. It will trample anybody and anything. Its charge bonus is through the roof. 200 ammunition. They are going to be chucking javelins till the day they die. Like, this thing is nuts. This thing is just absolutely nuts. You're going to be seeing these a lot. Just get prepared. Be prepared to be fighting armies that probably have at least 3 mammoths, if not 4. Because really, you don't even need the War Mammoth. You can just do this, and then just get some Marauders to sit at their feet and protect their ankles from Achilles or whatever. Like, that's all you really, like, you could do that, and it could work. It's hard to stop that many monstrous creatures with that many hit points and that hit that hard. It's hard. But if you want the upgraded Pharaoh Mammoth, you can get the War Mammoth. They do bonus versus large javelins as they're running around rampaging over everybody's face. They cause Fear and Terror. They're insane. Then, if that's not enough, there's also a War Mammoth with a War Shrine, which I think shares the basic stats of the War Mammoth, but lower hit points? Yeah. So they have slightly lower hit points, and they are lower speed because they have this giant shrine on their back. But the shrine, as you can see here, gives them an ability to give a unit unbreakable and also fire damage for 16 seconds. And they also have a constant aura around them, providing 10 leadership to everything within a 40-meter area. Which is a pretty big deal because Norskins have average to low leadership. Kind of a similar problem that the Greenskins have. So anything that can also grant them a leadership buff, and hell, let's say you put this thing in between 2 Pharaoh Mammoths, and oh look, their leadership is up to 65, so it's even harder to break them. Or, War Mammoths, so bring them up to 70. So, it's pretty good. The War Mammoth, I think, is a very good support unit. I don't even know if I would call it a support unit. It's a brutal... it's a wrecking ball that can also support. This thing is nuts. It's also very expensive. 2,400 is no joke. That's a ton of money to put. I don't know how often I would actually use the War Mammoth, but you can if you want to. And then there's even another variant, the Soul Crusher, which is going to be the renowned version of the War Mammoth. So like the normal War Mammoth, they have a bunch of Marauders up there chucking javelins. Their melee stats are better than the War Mammoth. I think their health is the same. Yeah, their health is the same, but their leadership and melee stats are better. And this one comes with the special ability of Enrage, so every 90 seconds they can get 44 damage resistance, percent damage resistance against everything in the game for 11 seconds. Again, I don't know if you really need to spend an extra 200 just to get an Enrage that lasts 11 seconds. You already have 10,000 hit points. I don't honestly think you really need this. This renowned unit kind of seems a little lacking, honestly, because I don't think you need it. Because, like, let's take the Arachnarok. You have the Arachnarok and then the Arachnarok Queen. The Arachnarok Queen has better stats, but she summons a bunch of little spiders, and that's a huge deal. Great pickup. Like, that's a cool renowned unit. This one, slightly better melee stats, slightly better leadership, and then an Enrage ability. Or, whatever damage resistance ability is, although I guess it does also get Strider. Okay, I guess I didn't mention that before, but it does also get Strider. So, I don't know, if you look at the map you're playing and you see a ton of forest in it, maybe that's another good reason, I guess, to get Soul Crusher, because it doesn't care about forests. Because it's Strider, so it has no debuffs in the forest. I guess that is kind of a big deal now I think about it. But that's very map dependent. If you're not on a map that has a ton of forest, if it's basically clear, flat, open space, I don't think I'd even get this. I don't think it's really worth it. So yeah, there you go. Those are all of the units in the Norscan roster. Now you may be wondering, how the hell do you deal with mammoths? So I made a video as dwarves, because I think dwarves are going to be seeing these suckers a lot, because these are armor-piercing anti-infantry, so I think people are going to be like, oh, let me just bring a bunch of mammoths against the dwarves. It's possible. It is possible to win, but you are going to probably have to build for it, and I'm going to show you a particular build here with some slayers, cannons, gyrocopters with brimstone guns, and Ungrim Iron Fist I think I use. So let me show you that video.
Ranging target! Nothing can stop us! Hungry Iron Fist! Range far, range fast! Move now! Strike out! Plow through! Kill them all in Beard's range! Go! Anad! With a cutter's anchor! Gyrocopter! Kill Urks! Aye! Kazoo! Kazoo! Aye! Watch it! Kazoo! Fire on the foe! Vengeance! Gyrocopter! Understood, Lord! Hit the target! Kazoo! Yes, Lord! Vengeance! For the ancestor gods! Shocks away! Gyrocopter! Daw! Will do! Daw! Yes! Kazoo! Daw! Vengeance! Kill us! Gyrocopter! Kill us! Fire on the boat! Yes! Get moving! Hit your targets well! For the High King! Gyrocopter! Right! Down! On! Fly! Yes! Unkill her! Gyrocopter! As you command! Yes! Ready to strike! For the cutters and Kazoo! Yes! Kazoo! Yes! Yes! What a vengeance! Honored! Aye! Yes, you can! Take him down! I am the Slayer King! Yes! The next tower! Anu! Charge! Kill us! Slayers! Attack him! Stop! Vengeance! On my own! Gyrocopter! Vengeance! Move now! Vengeance! Move to vengeance! For the Karazanko! Slayers! Aye! Yes! Ready to strike! Gyrocopter! Kill them! Kazoo! Alayan! Bless the others! And kill us! Kazoo! Yes, Lord! Vengeance! Kill us! Kill the old splitters! Gyrocopter! Kazakan, Kazakit! Move! Obey me! For the ancestor gods! Yes! Kazoo! Pull out! For bridge far! Vengeance! Gyrocopter! Gyrocopter! On! Yes! Yes! Shoot the wizards! Line on the foe! It is a reckoning! The active jungle thirsts! Gyrocopter! Vengeance! Can't we Copter! Cover them! Off we go! It is an order! Killers! Yes, Lord! Yes! Gyrocopter! Range far! Range fast! For the carousel course! Vengeance! Vengeance! Move now! Strike out! Kazoo! Yes! Slay everything without your The clans unite! Stop! My doom approaches! Yes! Nothing can stop us! Plow through! Strike out! Off we yes! go! Kazoo! Race far! Race fast! Nothing can stop us! Now! Move! Cannon! It is a reckoning! Runes and spellbreaking! To the Karazhan tour! Strike the earth! Still urged! Get moving! Charge! And down! Charge! Dwarf warriors! Move now! Vengeance! Axes out! Take him down! They have wronged us!
So I definitely think you're going to be seeing armies like that one that I made for the AI to use probably a lot when you're fighting against Norsca. People are going to see the Mammoths, they're going to realize how strong the Mammoths can be, and they are going to abuse the hell out of the Mammoths, I feel. And it's going to be hard, I think, to counter them. I made that build specifically to counter the elephants, because I made the build that I was fighting against, so I knew what I was fighting against, and I still got close to losing, you know? And I knew it was coming. So if you don't build for Mammoth focused armies, like if I just had a bunch of, I don't know, like Iron Breakers, I had a couple Slayers, I had like a couple of Dwarf Warriors with like throwing axes and shit, like the Mammoths can just go over your Dwarf Infantry, get into your whatever is behind them, be them Troll Hammer Torpedo, because I'm sure you're going to try those against the Mammoths, and they may get a round or two off, but these things have so many hit points that they're going to just blow through your front line of Longbeards and get into your Troll Hammer Torpedoes, and they're going to ignore your Slayers. Like, they don't care. They have so many hit points. It takes so long to kill them. I think they're really going to be tough to deal with, but we'll see. When this faction is actually released to everybody, I get to play a lot online against different people, see what different strategies people come up with to fight Mammoths. Maybe they're not going to be as big of a deal as I think they are, but I think they're going to be a big deal for like a very long time. I think. So again, that is the Norscan roster here. Oh, one other quick thing about the Mammoths, because I was trying to counter them. Goon squads still work pretty effectively. Specifically, Bretonnian double Royal Pegasus Knights with King Llewellyn the Conqueror charging a single Mammoth at a time can still destroy it in about 2 cycle charges. For the Empire, you can get 2 Empire Captains, Boris Todbringer or Karl Franz, somebody on a Griffin, and then some kind of caster, either Jade Wizard or an Amber Wizard or something. And that Goon Squad can take care of them. But you got to be very careful, because if you sit on the ground too long, the Mammoths will destroy your Goon Squad. But if you cycle charge in and out with a Goon Squad, the Mammoths are also weak to that. So it's either that or just a ton of firepower and hope you bring them down before they wreck too much of your forces. So that's another potential route you can go. Flying Goon Squads, Sniper Forces, they can wreck them. Alright, so with the roster now behind us, let's do a quick jump into the campaign, because there are 2 different legendary lords you have access to. It's going to be Norsca, being led by Wulfric the Wanderer. Wulfric, all of his units are going to receive the Fear ability. Every single unit that he has, he buffs Mammoth units with additional melee attack, and Marauders are cheaper. And he is, I don't know, currently I'm like 120 turns into a Wulfric campaign, and it is a lot of fun. There is no Chaos Invasion whatsoever, at least I don't think there is. I haven't beaten it yet, but up until turn 120, there's been no mention of chaos whatsoever. There's been like, you know, rumbling of stirring of chaos. So I don't think chaos is enabled when you're playing as the Norscan factions, which thank goodness, because 1, I wouldn't want to fight against chaos, and 2, if the more likely outcome of you being allied with chaos happened, it'd be such an easy campaign. Because honestly, it's kind of a power trip as soon as you unite Norsca, well, you know what? I'm doing a Norsca campaign. You can watch that as well, but it's a fun one. Because in Norsca, you can also do monster hunts. After you kill these monster hunts, which are basically quest battles, you get a ton of different cool loot that can give you like special casting abilities. It's really cool. You just travel across the world, raiding, pillaging, chopping people's heads off, making mammoths just trample down Empire, Bretonia, Green. It doesn't matter. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot. I've had a lot of fun with this campaign. But anyway, that's Wulfric, and then the other start is going to be Wintertooth being led by Throg, who is also in the far north, and he is all about buffing up his trolls. So you can see that he increases their resistance. You can see all units in his army are immune to attrition. So he's a very good lord to send down into like the vampire count lands. If you want to try and kill vampire counts, he won't suffer any of their attrition, or like the Badlands attrition from the greenskins. Like none of that. He doesn't care. And you can see that also the trolls are going to be cheaper under his care. He is a pretty cool legendary lord to mess around with in the campaign, and he's a lot of fun. Another big mechanic of the campaign for them is going to be showing allegiance to a specific god, and the more allegiance you show, the more benefits you get from that god. And then the other thing is, if you kill the leader of another Norscan faction, you know, one of the other various tribes that start up here, if you kill the leader, you can immediately confederate that faction. So just hunt down their leaders, declare war on them, kill that guy. Make sure you kill him. Don't let him run away from the battle. You kill that guy, and then you immediately go into diplomacy, confederate, they all belong to you. And you can unite the North pretty quickly that way. It's another cool unique function, and that will then free you up to try and fight the Krakadrak dwarves that share these mountains with you. I think they're actually right there on this campaign map. And then you can go to town, friend. You take your mammoths into North Empire, into Bretonia, and you will see peasants run for their lives. It's a lot of fun. I can't stress that enough. But anyway, those are the two legendary lords, their starting positions, and general mechanics of how the Norskins play out on the campaign. I highly suggest you try either Norsca or Wintertooth or both. Again, I've had a lot of fun with the campaign. It's kind of a carefree one. It seems kind of an easier one, but it's a power trip, like I said. It makes you feel powerful, just rampaging through these human lands with these giant monster armies. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And so that's it. I hope you enjoyed the Norscan overview. And to leave you, I'm just going to leave you with just a fun battle I did with a bunch of skin wolves being led by their skin wolf champion guy against a bunch of beastmen minotaurs. Because I don't know. I just wanted to throw a bunch of monstrous creatures against each other. But again, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it informative. And I will see you hopefully in the Norscan campaign. Take care.
I will